Being able to trade down within tiers at positions while still maintaining production is by far the easiest way to add draft capital or more assets in general to your roster, and that is going to be the point of this series throughout the entire 2024 offseason. The way this is going to work is I'm going to show you guys stats from two similar players, but one is valued at a premium in startup drafts right now, and the other is valued as the more generic version, we'll say, and then we're going to break it all down. So first up, we have a wide receiver comparison, and our premium receiver is currently 25 years old, and in 14 games played last year, averaged per game 7.4 targets, 5.1 receptions, 72 yards, 0.3 touchdowns, 14 fantasy points per game, and totaled 6 top 24 weeks and 2 top 12 weeks. Our generic receiver just turned 26 years old, and in 16 games played last year, averaged per game 7.5 targets, 4.1 receptions, 70 receiving yards, 0.5 touchdowns, 14.1 fantasy points per game, with 7 top 24 weeks, 2 of which were top 12. I'll give you guys like 3 seconds to lock in a guess on who each player is. But if you haven't guessed it yet, our premium receiver is Jaylen Waddle, currently valued as wide receiver 12 in January ADP, and the generic receiver is DK Metcalf, currently valued as wide receiver 18. So why the discrepancy here? Well, to be honest, I don't really know. I mean, I can assume it's because people just believe in Jaylen Waddle's pedigree, and he also has had the more recent elite fantasy season as the wide receiver 8 in 2022. But DK Metcalf wasn't that far behind him. He was the wide receiver 14 in 2022 and wide receiver 15 in 2021. For all intents and purposes, they are the same player. They both thrive on efficiency and big plays to make an impact for fantasy football. And when those big plays and efficiency aren't there, then they're not going to be all that good because neither of them have the security of being the #1 target on their team. Waddle, as we all know, is stuck behind Tyreek Hill for at least 2 more seasons, which may not seem like a lot through a dynasty lens, but that is 2 more seasons of Jaylen Waddle possibly repeating what he just did this year in 2023, and 2 more seasons of him not being the wide receiver 1 on his own team. I actually have more faith in DK Metcalf becoming the solidified wide receiver 1 on the Seahawks sooner than Waddle, and DK's situation can significantly improve as early as 2024. Tyler Lockett can be cut this offseason to save $8 million, or he could be a post-June 1st cut like what happened to Dalvin Cook, and Seattle then saves $18 million this year. If you remove Tyler Lockett from the equation in Seattle, their passing offense is now funneled through DK Metcalf and Jackson Smith-Njigba, which opens the door for both of them to see a lot more targets. And you might be worried about the coaching staff changes in Seattle with Pete Carroll being fired, and now offensive coordinator Shane Waldron is being hired by the Chicago Bears. So we do have a very big change coming to Seattle because of these changing coaching staffs, but I don't think it's going to be a bad change. They're doing their due diligence on just about everyone that's available right now, and I haven't really had an issue with any of the names mentioned so far getting interviews for the head coaching position. I think the best candidates from a fantasy standpoint include Ben Johnson, Frank Smith, and Bobby Slowick, all of whom are offensive-minded coaches, with Ben Johnson being phenomenal in Detroit over the last 2 years, and the other 2 having experience in either a Kyle Shanahan or Sean McVay coaching tree, and having also been offensive coordinators for very high-powered offenses this year. So a new coaching staff might actually be a good thing for DK Metcalf's value, in addition to the possible removal of Tyler Lockett to tighten up the target shares a bit, and he is shaping up to be a huge buy low candidate for 2024. According to our trade analyzer, the difference between Waddle and Metcalf right now is hovering around an early 2nd round pick in Superflex leagues or about the 112 in 1 quarterback leagues, which in this class is a very decent player coming back to you, like a Keon Coleman, Xavier Worthy type of receiver, or basically your pick of any of the running backs in this class, like Braylon Allen, Trey Benson, Bucky Irving, Blake Corum. Or that difference could be a veteran player like a Hollywood Brown or Josh Downs at receiver, or take the shot on Aaron Jones still being the starter in Green Bay, or Tyjae Spears being the starter in Tennessee, or you could just push that can down the road entirely and just make it a 2025 or 2026 first round pick instead of an early 2nd rounder this year. I will also note that this same strategy works going from Devonta Smith down to DK Metcalf too, as Smith is also another high-end wide receiver 2 with wide receiver 1 upside that a lot of people just value more just because of the better offense and situation that he's currently in. So if you have Devonta Smith and you can drop down to DK Metcalf and get a really good asset on top, like any of the ones that I mentioned going from Waddle to DK, then I'd be trying to do that as well. Next up, we have a tight end comparison, and our premium tight end is currently 24 years old, and in 16 games played last year, averaged per game 5.7 targets, 4.5 receptions, 42 yards, 0.1 receiving touchdowns, 9.4 fantasy points per game, and had 8 top 12 weeks and 3 top 6 weeks. And our generic tight end is also 24 years old, turning 25 in March, and in 15 games played last year, averaged per game 6.1 targets, 4.9 receptions, 48 receiving yards, 0.4 receiving touchdowns, 12 fantasy points per game with 10 top 12 weeks and 5 top 6 weeks. I'll again give you 3 seconds to lock in a guess on who each player is. And if you haven't guessed it yet, our premium tight end is Dalton Kincaid, currently valued as the tight end 3 in January ADP. And our generic tight end is actually Kmet, currently valued as tight end 15 overall in January ADP. So why the discrepancy here? Well, this one actually is pretty easy. Kincaid is the new hotness. He's the first round rookie tight end who had a killer stretch of games for fantasy in the middle of the season, where he was the tight end 7 overall from week 7 through 14. And Kmet, I mean, he's just a guy, right? He's not flashy. He doesn't do anything fancy. And come on, I mean, is Kmet really a guy you're going to trust as your every week starter at the tight end position versus a hyper athletic rookie drafted in round 1 being thrown passes to from an elite quarterback? Well, actually, yes, because look at the numbers again. Kmet beat Kincaid in nearly every statistical category this year. He out-targeted him. He caught more touchdowns, had more top 12 and top 6 weeks at the tight end position for fantasy football, and just straight up outproduced him on the yearly basis in fantasy this year. And remember that same killer stretch that Dalton Kincaid had from week 7 through 14, where he was the tight end 7, averaging 13.4 fantasy points per game? Well, Kmet was right behind him as the tight end 10 overall, averaging 13.2 fantasy points per game over those exact same weeks. And I can keep going too. I can refute basically any argument you have as to why Kincaid should be valued so much higher than Kmet in Dynasty. Is it because Kincaid is more athletic? Because I don't really know if that's true. Kmet posted a 107 speed score with a 4.7 40-yard dash at 262 pounds, along with a 37-inch vertical, again at 262 pounds. Is it because Kincaid is more likely to be a target hog in Buffalo? Because again, I don't really know if that's true. Kmet already out-targeted him this year, competing with DJ Moore, while Kincaid was with a washed-up Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis, who can't take the next step, and couldn't even break free from Dawson Knox at his own position either, in an offense that threw the ball 70 more times than Chicago did this year. And if you want to argue potential added competition for Kmet in Chicago in 2024 with possibly Marvin Harrison Jr. or Malik Neighbors being drafted, I can say the exact same thing for Dalton Kincaid, as I expect Buffalo to take a really hard look at their offensive weapons, with Diggs aging out quickly, Gabe Davis again not taking the next step. And again, I have to point out that Dawson Knox is still there for 3 more years. He signed a massive contract at the beginning of the 2023 offseason, and Kincaid's splits with and without Dawson Knox this year are pretty stark. He averaged 4 more points per game in games without Dawson Knox and only 7.5 points per game in games with Dawson Knox. I think the only argument that you could have for Kincaid is just saying that he's a rookie and you're hoping that he's going to improve upon a really strong year for a rookie tight end. And I completely understand that argument. But at the same time, they are also the same age right now, just a few months apart, and Kmet already has 4 seasons under his belt compared to Kincaid's 1. So when both of them are hitting the prime of their careers at 25, 26, 27 years old, Kmet is going to have 3 more years of NFL experience to draw back on than Dalton Kincaid. And listen, I'm not saying that Kmet should be ranked ahead of Dalton Kincaid in Dynasty straight up. If they were both priced identically, I would take Dalton Kincaid, but they're not priced identically. They are 12 spots apart in positional ADP, with Dalton Kincaid being valued as a top 3 Dynasty tight end. According to our analyzer, the difference between the two is a late first in Superflex leagues or a borderline mid first in 1 quarterback leagues, which means that you could literally get a player like Troy Franklin, Brian Thomas Jr., Keon Coleman, your pick of the running backs, or add something to that first and vault yourself into that Brock Bowers or Odunze tier, or vault yourself even further to Malik Neighbors, Drake May, or Jaden Daniels tier in Superflex. You can do that with an extra first that you acquired by trading away Dalton Kincaid for Kmet. Or again, you don't want a rookie pick or you can't easily swing a first round pick. How about Jaden Reed or Rashee Rice at wide receiver, or an older veteran wide receiver like an Amari Cooper? What about James Cook or Rashad White at the running back position? position. You might even be able to swing a Kirk Cousins, Aaron Rodgers, or Baker Mayfield type of quarterback in Superflex leagues to add as your QB3 for depth in 2024. That is how expensive Dalton Kincaid has become and how worthwhile it might be to drop down from him down to Kmet, get something really, really good on top by doing so, and again, not lose any production whatsoever at the tight end position for fantasy football.